The moment she dropped into the aisle seat, clutching her fraying tote bag like it was armor, the man beside her turned his head slowly. A faint smile flickered, polished and practiced, the kind she'd seen on television interviews but couldn't quite place. He wore a tailored navy suit, silver cufflinks glinting as he reached to silence his phone. He looked like he belonged in a sleek corner office somewhere high above the city, not wedged beside her on a budget airline flight where the overhead bins barely shut. But what caught his attention wasn't her, at least not at first. It was the way her hands shook as she pulled the duct-taped backpack onto her lap and unzipped it, to check the bottle of milk inside. Beside the bottle, a tiny pink sock peeked out, folded carefully. She sat stiffly, glancing out the oval window as the rain streaked across the glass. Her jeans were faded, the knees thinning, and the hood of her sweatshirt frayed at the edges. When the baby in her lap squirmed, she kissed the top of his head automatically, her lips trembling just slightly. He couldn't have been more than 6 months old. Rough morning? The man asked finally, his voice even, warm. The last boarding call echoed through the terminal, her pulse quickening as Sophie sprinted toward the gate, rain still dripping from her thrift store coat. The plane was nearly full when she stumbled down the aisle, breathless, clutching her battered purse like it was holding her life together, because it was. Seat 14B, she slid into it, damp hair falling across her face, unaware she'd taken the wrong seat. Beside her, a man in a perfectly tailored navy suit glanced up from his tablet. He had that impossible kind of presence, the quiet authority of someone used to expensive rooms and people who listened when he spoke. The corner of his mouth lifted in the faintest smirk, like he knew something she didn't, and maybe he did, because 10 minutes into the flight, that seat mistake would change everything Sophie thought she knew about herself, about kindness, about the strangers sitting beside us when life is falling apart. She kept her gaze on the scratch tray table, praying he wouldn't notice the frayed straps of her duct-taped backpack stuffed beneath the seat. Her sneakers were soaked through from the dash across the tarmac, toes numb. The rain hadn't helped her hair either. It clung to her cheeks, a little wild, a little defiant. She tugged the sleeves of her coat over her cold hands and counted the hours till landing, till she could figure out the next disaster waiting for her. "You okay?" His voice was low, smooth, a question asked like he actually meant it. She flinched slightly. "Yeah, just long day." He nodded slowly, eyes tracing the water stains on her sleeve, the thinness of her sweater peeking out from beneath the coat. "Where you headed?" Sophie hesitated. Truth or polite lie? "Boston, job interview. If I can even make it." She forced a small smile, pretending confidence she didn't feel. He studied her for a second, then shifted, extending a hand. "Ethan Cole." She blinked. The name tickled something in her memory, maybe from a business article glimpsed in a cafe once. She shook his hand anyway, noting the watch sleek, understated, the kind you didn't find at thrift stores. The flight hummed around them, attendants moving like clockwork. Sophie tried to focus on the clouds streaking by the window, not the emptiness gnawing in her stomach. Her last meal had been a half-crushed granola bar, fished from the bottom of her purse. Rent was overdue. The eviction notice had been curling on her apartment door for a week now. Like a threat she couldn't outrun. At the 2-hour mark, the captain announced turbulence ahead. The plane dipped sharply, a child cried 3 rows back, and Sophie's hand tightened around the armrest till her knuckles went white. Ethan noticed. "Hey," he said softly, steady. "We're fine." "Just a bump." She nodded quickly, but her other hand had slipped into her pocket, fingers counting the few coins she had left. A nervous habit she couldn't break. When the turbulence eased, he asked about her job interview. She told him it was at a small marketing firm, nothing fancy, but she needed it badly. He didn't say much then, just listened, eyes thoughtful. Re-hook, somewhere over Ohio, She spotted him typing on his tablet, screen glowing faintly. The words Coal Industries Annual Report flickered at the top. Her breath caught. Ethan Cole, CEO. She'd read about his company, once a giant in tech, offices in cities she'd only seen in movies. And here he was, next to her, while her bank account barely held enough for bus fare after landing. Sophie shifted uncomfortably, aware of every contrast. His polished shoes against her torn sneakers, his crisp cologne against the damp smell of her coat, his calm voice against the panic thudding in her chest whenever she thought of home, a fridge with only scraps, a flickering bulb in the kitchen ceiling, the pile of unpaid bills swallowing her table whole. "Big day for you tomorrow then," he said finally, locking his tablet. "Yeah, if I don't mess it up." His smile was faint, almost curious. Maybe the right people just need to notice. Something in the way he said it made her throat tighten unexpectedly. The plane began its descent too soon, her nerves twisting tighter with every drop in altitude. She imagined stepping off into the cold night, with nowhere to go except the cheapest motel she could find. But as the wheels screeched against the runway, Ethan glanced at her, expression unreadable, and said, "Listen, there's something I want to ask you before we land." Her breath hitched. The plane taxied toward the gate, but Sophie barely heard the flight attendant's announcements over the pounding in her chest. Ethan's words hung in the air, unfinished, pulling at her curiosity and fear in equal measure. He waited until the seatbelt sign dinged off before speaking again, voice low so only she could hear. "I'm looking for someone," he said carefully, eyes steady on hers. "Someone who understands struggle. Not just resumes and degrees. Real life. Someone who remembers what it feels like to have nothing." Sophie blinked, unsure if this was a job interview or some kind of trick. "And you think that's me?" Her voice cracked despite her best effort. His gaze flickered briefly toward the duct-taped backpack, the way her fingers twisted nervously in her lap. "I think you have a story most people overlook." Outside, rain blurred the airport lights into streaks of gold and white. Passengers filed out, chattering, wrestling carry-ons from overhead bins. Sophie stayed frozen in her seat, unsure if she was about to wake up in the same mess she'd boarded with, or if something was shifting beneath her feet. By the time they stepped into the terminal, Ethan had offered her his business card, the weight of it shocking in her palm, thick, embossed. The kind that didn't bend easily. "Meet me tomorrow," he said simply. "Not at my office. Somewhere else. 10 a.m. I'll text you." And then he was gone, swallowed by the crowd, leaving Sophie with nothing but his card and 1,000 questions. That night, in the cheapest motel she could find, the air conditioner rattled like it was coughing itself to death. The blankets smelled faintly of bleach. Sophie sat on the edge of the bed staring at her phone, his message finally pinging through. "Harbor Cafe. 10 sharp. Don't be late." She almost didn't go. Morning brought drizzle and gray skies. Her shoes were still damp from yesterday, the motel's weak coffee barely warming her as she walked the 3 blocks to the cafe. Inside, warmth hit her like a wall-hissing espresso machines, cinnamon rolls glistening behind glass, soft jazz humming above the chatter. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of her fraying sweater. The smudge on her jeans. Ethan was already there, immaculate as before, but today with a dark wool coat draped over his chair. His tie loosened just enough to make him look almost approachable. "You came," he said, as if he'd expected she might not. Sophie nodded, sitting opposite him, hands tightening around the mug the waiter brought over. Steam curled upward, warming her face. Ethan leaned forward. "I run a foundation," he said. "We fund community projects, job training programs, places that give people a second chance. But I need someone to work directly with the people we help. Someone who understands the stakes." Her stomach dropped. "You mean a job?" "I mean purpose. With a paycheck, yes. Decent one. Sophie's mind spun. She thought of the eviction notice, the empty fridge, the landlord's voice on the phone growing sharper each day.
Really?
Why me? You don't even know me. He smiled faintly. I know enough. I saw how you carried yourself yesterday. Even with nothing, you kept your chin up. For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her throat closed, the room tilting slightly with the weight of what this could mean, but reality crashed back fast. I don't have nice clothes for an office. I don't even have a car right now. Ethan waved a hand. We'll handle that. First paycheck up front if you need. No one should start behind the line. Matt did it. Her eyes burned before she could stop them, a single tear escaping despite her frantic blinking. She hated crying in public, hated how raw it felt. The rest of the morning blurred. They discussed details, training, schedules, the first project helping single mothers with housing applications. Each plan felt like someone opening a window in a room she hadn't realized was suffocating her. By noon, Ethan stood, slipping his coat back on. One act of generosity, he said quietly, almost to himself, can change the whole map of a life. Sometimes both lives. She looked at him then, really looked. Not at the CEO, the tailored suits, the quiet wealth, but at the man who had noticed a stranger on a plane when no one else would have. Months later, Sophie would remember that day whenever she walked into the foundation's bright office, when rent was paid, when the fridge was full, when she helped someone else fill out a job application with shaking hands, because sometimes fate doesn't knock. Sometimes it sits beside you on a plane in a navy suit and asks if you're okay.